Good morning, college football fans, and episode 43 of Walk It Off with Chappy is another Big 12 mailbag question, and it comes from Brennan Moore at BMooreCFB on Twitter, and he's also one of the masterminds behind the Sideline Sports Network, the SSN network. Many of you are probably familiar with those team sites. But he asks, Chappy, how do you feel about the over-under for Iowa State this year at 6.5? And B. Moore, I got to tell you, that one is tough because I really like Matt Campbell. I really like what Iowa State is doing in terms of entrenching themselves as a solid player in the Big 12. But let's keep in mind, a big part of what has gotten Matt Campbell where he's at Iowa State right now are the rock-solid figures that are now gone. We're talking Brock Purdy, Breece Hall, Charlie Kolar, Chase Allen, Mike Rose, Greg Eisworth. Those guys were basically 3 or 4 year starters for that program, and they were the bricks and the mortar that kept that Iowa State toughness together. Well, they're gone now, and it's very, very tough to replace not only their talent, but their leadership, their work ethic. And you would like to think that Matt Campbell has done a good job, and those guys have done a good job at laying the foundation and getting the next batch ready for next man up. So we'll see. Well, let's look at their strengths. Offensively, pretty good receivers, all Big 12 receiver Xavier Hutchinson. He caught 83 passes a year ago for 12 yards a catch, only 5 touchdowns, but he made some big plays downfield. He was really their go-to guy outside of their tight ends. Jalen Noel is another receiver who should emerge and have a pretty good year this year. They're bringing in Dimitri Stanley from Colorado, who was a solid pass catcher for the Buffs. Sean Shaw also comes back, and they really like freshman receiver Greg Gaines. So that receiving core looks to be pretty good. The offensive line, even though they lose 3 starters, they bring back Trevor Downing and Darrell Simmons at center and guard respectively. Jake Remsburg, I think, gives them a good tackle. And Jeff Myers, their offensive line coach there, is considered to be one of the best up-and-coming younger coaches. He made the 30 under 30 list by 24/7 Sports. So he knows what he's doing, and he's churned out some pretty good offensive lines in his tenure there. On the defensive side of the ball, they bring back the NCAA sack leader Will McDonald. McDonald is also joined by nose tackle Isaiah Lee, who added 5.5 tackles for loss and 6 pass breakups. So he's good at getting his big mitts up and knocking down balls that are trying to go through the offensive line. And then they get transfer MJ Anderson from Minnesota, a defensive end who is athletic, he's lengthy, so I think he's going to provide some help on that defensive front. Linebackers Orion Vance and Jerry Vaughn were really like linebackers 3 and 4 last year, behind Jake Hummel and Mike Rose. So they bring some experience, and then they bring in Colby Reeder from Delaware, who coaches and Iowa State people really like. He's a physical linebacker, athletic, plays kind of outside of his body. And, you know, another strength about Iowa State is under Matt Campbell, they're a very disciplined team. They were in the top 20 in basically all positive penalty stats last year, meaning they didn't commit a lot of penalties. They didn't make stupid mistakes. Any penalties they committed were more than likely calculated. And they were also 53rd in turnover margin, which is pretty good, pretty respectable. So let's talk about the concerns. They were 2-5 in close games last year, but what scares me is that, you know, if they were bringing back a lot of experience, normally that translates into turning those close losses into wins the next year. Well, like I said, they lose a lot of that experience that they had with those guys that we mentioned. So that concerns me. The secondary, or basically both passing games. So Hunter Deckers is a talented quarterback. Is he ready to take the Big 12 by storm? Maybe not just yet. They also like freshman Rocco Becht. So one of those two guys needs to emerge and establish a solid rapport with this group of receivers. That's a good foundation to work with. You know, keep in mind they also lost those all Big 12 tight ends, Charlie Kolar and Chase Allen. On the defensive side, the secondary, they lose a lot. So, you know, they lost 4 of their main defensive backs. We talked about some of them. They do bring back Anthony Johnson and Bo Freiler, but losing guys like Eisworth, Daytron and Isheem Young, Craig McDonald, Kamani King. Cornerback TJ Tampa did a pretty good job, especially toward the end of the season, so he'll be able to make some things happen. Other concerns in the backfield at running back, I have not heard a lot of positives about Jarrell Brock ever since he got on campus, so maybe he'll be a late bloomer, but it sounds like Cartevious Norton, a true freshman, is going to be a guy who's going to get a lot of looks, and he might be the solid primary ball carrier by the end of the season. Deion Silas was impressive with a 5.8 yards per carry average last season as their third back, but again, kind of a smaller sample size, so we'll see if he can translate that into bigger things this year. The schedule doesn't look too bad, but again, I think the Big 12 is pretty top heavy this year, and unfortunately for Clones fans, I don't see Iowa State in that top 5. So they start out with SEMO, which I think is a win. Then they have to go to Iowa, where it's been well documented that Matt Campbell has not beaten the Hawkeyes in 5 tries as the head man at Iowa State. They have Ohio and Baylor back-to-back home games. Baylor's going to be a tough one this year. They go to Kansas, where they've won 11 of 12 against the Jayhawks. They host Kansas State. They have not done well against KSU, so Iowa State has lost 11 of the last 14 meetings against the Wildcats, so that's going to be a tough one, although they get them in Jack Trice. And then they go to Darrell K. Royal Stadium to play Texas, and Iowa State has beaten Texas 3 straight years, but Texas is one of those very eerie teams. They could be just another Texas team again, or they could really catch college football by storm this year and be a powerhouse. I'm talking a top 10 team legit in the Big 12 and nationally. Then they get a bye, and then they have to come home to take on Oklahoma and West Virginia back-to-back. Now, Matt Campbell is 2-5 against the Sooners, but all 7 games have been decided by 7 points or less. So there's some hope there. West Virginia, they're 4-2. Matt Campbell's 4-2 against the Mountaineers. They won last year, so I think Iowa State gets one of those two. They either upset Oklahoma at Jack Trice, or it's a close loss and they come back the next week and they take it out on the Mountaineers. So one of those two should be a win. Then they travel to Oklahoma State, where they've lost 8 of the last 10, although they beat the Pokes last year. Home against Texas Tech, where they're 5-1, although they lost last year, snapping a 5-game win streak against the Red Raiders. And then they finished the year in Fort Worth at TCU, where Matt Campbell is 3-3, although they lost to the Horned Frogs last year. I see the Cyclones getting the best of them this season. So if Deckers or Becht can take hold of Tom Manning's offense and get that passing game established, and if they can get something of a dependable running game and kind of take care of the Breece Hall hangover, and if that secondary solidifies, especially for the second half of the season, again, when they play OU, Oklahoma State, and then some pretty explosive, potentially explosive offenses in Texas Tech and TCU, I see a 6-6 season for Iowa State. So by that, I'm going to lean the under 6.5 for Iowa State. But again, it's very tough for me to pick that, because I could also see Iowa State snagging 1 or 2 wins that I'm not expecting them to in preseason and finish with 8 wins and hit that over. So again, thanks for the question. Be More, again, follow him at BeMoreCFB, and also check out all the work at SSN_CFB. The college football preview will be coming out soon, and yours truly has contributed at least 3 articles to that preview. I covered North Carolina, Louisville, and Northern Illinois, so be looking online for that. Good coverage by Moore and his team of writers. Thanks for watching Walk It Off with Chappy. Hit me with your comments and your thoughts. I'm Chappy, and this is what I know.